After the Constitution had been ratified, the Judiciary Act of 1789 was passed, which established the federal court system. However, in the Constitution, the amount of power that the court had was undefined, and these powers would be defined through the court's interpretation. The Supreme Court had limited power, and the little power that they did have was just to oversee the cases and help bring the court to a final decision. Some important facts about the Marbury versus Madison case is that the Supreme Court case came about in the year of 1803, and the case was centered on William Marbury, who was appointed Justice of the Peace at the end of President Adams' term, and it was centered on James Madison, who was the newly appointed Secretary of the State for President Jefferson's administration. Now, why this case was so important is because it gave the Supreme Court the power to declare laws constitutional or unconstitutional, which essentially gave the court the power to determine what is law and what is not. And the purpose of going into this court case was to limit the power of the Supreme Court so they couldn't do whatever they wanted. However, it backfired and the court ended up with much more power than before, and it pretty much gave the court the power to decide what laws the American people. This case impacts our lives today because it shaped the way that the government is run, and it gave the Supreme Court more power than the people. The Supreme Court today has 9 unelected officials who determine what law is, and the power of the Electoral College is nothing compared to the power the Supreme Court has. If the people decide one thing by majority rule, the Supreme Court has the power to overrule the decision of the people with their decision alone. This affects the way we view democracy, and it affects the way we live in America because our fate is determined by a higher power, in this case, the Supreme Court. The aspect of this case that I would change to bring this case into the 21st century would be to take the final decision out of the hands of the Supreme Court justices and into the hands of the people. I would change the decision making to be determined by a jury and have the case just be overseen by the justices. Overall, this court case is one of the most important cases in history, and it left America in a place where all of our opinions barely affected how we live our lives, and what rules we have to follow are placed upon us by our Supreme Court system.